Hi, I'm Brooke, the founder of the Santa Barbara Blockchain Institute with a mission to provide Bitcoin lessons for everyone. Today I'm going to continue with my series of 10 lectures on Bitcoin and blockchain technology with number 6, a more practical lesson today about ways to hold Bitcoin, what custody means, and the different ways that you can achieve custody, which is something that makes Bitcoin a little bit different from the other traditional assets that you've seen in the past. But before we get into custody and holding onto your Bitcoin, I need to go over my disclosures. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not investment advice in any way. Do your own research. This is just informational, educational content for you to consider. And I'm not a technical expert or programmer, but I do hold digital assets, so I do have skin in the game. So as I mentioned, we're going to consider how to hold Bitcoin today. How do you acquire it and how do you custody it? And really that's something that sets Bitcoin apart, as I said, from other assets in the past. As you know from prior lectures, the nature of Bitcoin's network security overall is basically to use the herd to protect the individuals. It's a cooperative security arrangement whereby everybody, not only the participants in the network, but anybody on the outside really can log into the internet and view transactions. And that kind of transparency really hasn't existed for us before in the world of institutions and of intermediaries. So that alone sets it apart. But what we're going to talk about more today is the individual wallets. And I'll refer you back to that illustration you saw earlier, but I picture the entire network as a giant transparent vault. And then the individual wallets within that are also transparent for everyone to see. So how does the protocol protect these individual wallets? In a couple of different ways, but mostly the idea here is that it uses cryptography, which is the ability to use variations on very, very large numbers, actually hexadecimals, which combine some letters in with the numbers to create really an unbreakable key or large many-digited number. The possibilities are so great that these sort of number along the lines of the number of atoms in the universe. So for all intents and purposes, this is an unbreakable code that is presented. And what that does is it allows you to self-custody your Bitcoin, and it eliminates the need for third parties because it's just so hard to break into these wallets. You don't need a bank or an institution to do it for you. Now, having said that, many people prefer to continue using these institutions for their custody because they don't consider themselves to be particularly tech savvy, or they're just uncomfortable with the idea of having the responsibility lay just within themselves, which is what it is when it's self-custody. So I'll refer you back to this illustration earlier that we made, and to consider the network as a giant transparent vault with everybody being able to look at it. And then within the vault, the actual tokens or Bitcoins are contained within individual wallets. Now there are many, many, many wallets. Infinite number of wallets can be created. And then the Bitcoin ends up being owned within these wallets and moved around when transactions are performed. Like we said before, the transactions are transparent to everyone, and it's through this collective security that the whole network remains safe. But when we talk about the individual wallets, those individual wallets are basically, they identify with two separate keys, and both these keys are algorithmically derived. So when we say key, what we really mean is a very long number string, a hexadecimal, actually numbers and letters, a string. And it is just that is the key. It's just a creation. There's no actual physical key, just like there are no actual physical Bitcoins. But this key is something that needs to be remembered. These two types of keys need to be remembered so that they can be properly used. So let's talk about these two keys. The first one is known as a public key. And this is pretty obvious to anybody who's had a bank account before. Your account needs to be numbered in such a way and shared publicly such that if people want to make deposits to it on your behalf, they can do so. It can be identified. So even on your checks for your old checking account, your bank account number is written on the actual checks. It's not a secret. It's a public code for everybody to be able to make deposits to you. So just like your bank account number, your public key is an address that you can share with other people so they can make deposits to it. Nothing secret about that. The second key, however, is algorithmically derived from the first key. So these are two that are linked together, these numbers, these very long number strings. But the private key is derived from the public key in such a way that there's no way it's going to be cracked or broken, at least not with today's computers. It would take something like 4.6 million years under today's computing power to be able to run through all the possibilities. So it's for all intents and purposes not going to happen. Now this private key is, however, really essential that it not be shared at all. This is how people lose their Bitcoin. They either lose access to this private key somehow, they lose it entirely, or they share it with a bad actor, either intentionally or by mistake. They share this key. Once this key is shared, that is the access to the Bitcoin wallet. And once it's gone for one way or another, then so goes the access also, or so go the coins in it. So you may remember that these days putting anything on the internet at all can be quite risky. It was not built for security. It was built to allow us to connect, not to secure things. So even something like taking a picture of this private key number, if that picture gets shared up to your Google Photos or your iPhotos or wherever it goes, that could be visible to a hacker. And so we make a very clear distinction here. There are two types of wallets here that you can use to hold your Bitcoin. One of them is called a hot wallet, and that's something that is reachable on the internet, however it works. An example of a hot wallet would be when you have an app on your phone to hold and trade your Bitcoin. That would be considered to be a hot wallet. And the other type we nickname as a cold wallet. And this is some sort of memory device that's just going to remember that very long number string that is your private key. It's going to remember it and keep it off the internet, completely offline. So, this could be as simple as writing it down on a piece of paper and locking it away somewhere. That would actually be an example of a cold wallet, because somebody on the internet just can't access that. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the ways to electronically secure it. So you've got a public key to identify the wallet, and you've got a private key to give access to it. And those two need to be kept separate. But your main decision in when you are going to own some Bitcoin, your main decision in how to custody it is similar to sort of thinking of it as gold, which we talked about before. Bitcoin is a little bit like digital gold. If you had some gold, you'd need to decide whether you wanted to bank your gold and give it to an institution to hold for you, or perhaps you'd want to literally bury it in your own backyard. And if you did that, the chances of someone else finding it would be very, very low, obviously. But then you're also entirely responsible for it. If something did happen to you and to the information of where it was buried, that might be a problem. So you do have entire self-custody if you decided to bury your gold in your backyard. So it's very much like that in the Bitcoin world, except in an electronic version of it. So your two choices of holding Bitcoin are either a self-hosted wallet, which means that you have entire responsibility for it. You have control, but you also have responsibility. Or you can keep your Bitcoin in an account on an exchange with a bank, with another entity that is set up to hold Bitcoin on your behalf, a custodian. So let's talk about those two things separately. If you hold it yourself in a self-hosted wallet, you have then a public key that we talked about, which would be the same sort of identifier for your wallet that you would share with other people. If you wanted somebody to send you Bitcoin, they would need to have this address, a wallet address. And that is also known as the public key. They would need to have that to send it to you. Now, to access it or to do any transactions, you would need to have the private key. And you would get all of this when you went to first set up your wallet, and there's a number of places online you can do that. There are a number of separate institutes that are set up and softwares that are set up to allow you to help have your own self-hosted wallet. But you would then also receive a private key, and you would have to decide, how are you going to keep that, because this is now entirely your responsibility. I'll talk about ways to do that in just a minute. But let's talk first about the other way that you could actually have your Bitcoin custodied, and that would be by keeping it on some sort of exchange or bank, as we mentioned before. So examples of this would be a Coinbase account or a Gemini account or a Binance account. And these exchanges may ring a bell with you if you've been near the space at all. This is the year 2022, so we're experiencing some of the downsides of using the exchange world. FTX has just kind of revealed itself to be a fraud. So if you do put 100% of your trust into an institution, that could be trouble. And that is exactly the reason that Satoshi originally came up with this idea of self-custodied peer-to-peer money, because we have lost trust in these institutions. So now if you decide though that you are not tech savvy enough to be responsible for your own wallet, and you decide that it's safer for you to keep it with an exchange, that's fine. It's a personal choice. The way that it works then is that exchange, Coinbase for example, has their own clear wallet inside that clear vault. They have their own wallet that they host. And what you have is you have ownership of your coins in their wallet on the chain, and you access that the normal way you would like any other bank, through your login and your password. So you're trusting them to keep your coins in their wallet on the blockchain, and they happen to keep all of their customers' coins in that same wallet on the blockchain, and they're keeping track of them, and they are responsible for them for you. So for some people, that's the safe way to do it, and they don't want the responsibility for self-custody. But for others, this is exactly the point of the Bitcoin world. So self-custody means total and complete control of your Bitcoin wallet on the blockchain, outside of the grasp of institutions and of governments, other intermediaries. An exchange account or a bank account of some form, any of these other institutional accounts, is a custodial account. So there's a third party who does hold your assets for you and is responsible for them, but they could also freeze them, restrict them, or otherwise interfere with them. Not so much an issue with the decentralized Bitcoin network, but with many of these other tokens, we found that for whatever reason, these assets might get frozen or restricted in some way. And if it's a centralized entity, they can do that. It's not in your control. A small side note is that some of these other entities like to call the self-custody alternative non-custodial, with the insinuation that there is no custodian involved there. I think it would more be accurately described as self-custodial. There is a custodian, it just happens to be you. And so you bear the responsibility for your own custody. So if you hear the term or non-custodial, it's the same as self-custodial. It's just a different way of saying that from the institution's perspective. But the old saying that started a long time ago is not your keys, not your Bitcoin, or it's come to now be not your keys, not your crypto, means that you are foregoing some of that potential custody arrangement if you allow a third party to touch it. And the only safe way for an original purist is to hold your own wallet. So let me give you an example of what it would look like if you use an exchange to hold your Bitcoin. Here's just an example page, and it looks very much like another online bank's page that you're familiar with. So in this case, it's a Coinbase page, and you see you've got tabs for your assets, for trading, for making payments, and for learning more and other types of things. In the middle here, you've got the assets themselves and their trading prices, and it's very easy to teach yourself to buy and to sell and to convert and to send and to receive. This is obviously, it's purposely made quite simple for everyday people to be able to use. So this is one of your alternatives if you don't like the idea of counting on yourself for custody. Now, if you do decide that you want to self-custody, you have your choice. You could choose to just memorize in your head that extremely long number that I showed you before here at the private key down here at the bottom here. It's a super long string of numbers and digits. You could try to remember that down at the bottom left, but probably not advised. You probably want to do some sort of arrangement to keep that better custodied. And so, of course, a number of companies have come out with devices to help memorize this, and these are really essentially just like memory sticks that really just remember that one number. And so you'll see a couple of these brand names here, Trezor and Ledger. And there's a picture of it in my hands just to give you an idea of the size. They're relatively small devices, and all they do is they remember that long number for you. So one interesting thing that I learned is that you would think, well, you've got to plug it in to connect it to your account and to sign a transaction and approve the transaction to show that you are the actual owner, that you hold the private key. And so one would think, well, I'm connecting it to the internet now, and it might get hacked. Although it's true you shouldn't leave it connected, that's not actually how it works. What happens is the transaction itself that you're proposing is downloaded to this device. This device then signs it electronically on the device and returns the transaction only, the signed transaction, to the internet. So your private key actually never leaves the device, which is kind of cool. And that's how that works. So you might also ask, well, I've got a couple of dogs. What happens if Sadie decides she's going to eat this little plastic gizmo, which is not beyond the realm of possibility? Fortunately, that was thought of also. So the manufacturers, the Ledger and the Trezor and so forth of these devices came up with backup way to secure this long hexadecimal number that is being kept in the memory of this device. There's a way to recover it. And so as a part of the software that comes with this device, you create a series of words. These are backup words, and you can use them to recover the private key to a new device if the dog ate it entirely. So these private words, again, would go into the software that's controlling your hardware device and allow you to regenerate your private key, and you can get a new little device and put the private key back on your new little device. So I'll give you some examples here of what these words might look like. I just used the names of fruits, but it's something similar to this where it's just a string of words. Some people, again, choose to try to remember all those words in their head. That's fine. Either way, you probably want to keep these recovery words in a different physical location from the actual device, just because if they're together, they may both get destroyed, and then you might have a problem, because if you don't have your hardware device and you don't have your backup words, your phrases, then you really could be out of trouble and join the people who've managed to lose their Bitcoin just through losing track of their private keys. So that's just a suggestion for you. Now, another thing you can do is you can use one of these metal, basically recovery phrase protectors, and you punch out the recovery phrases out of the series of letters and numbers, and you secure them in this little metal case. And it's fireproof, and it's supposedly sort of indestructible, so you've got a way to protect your backup words a little bit more. But again, I would suggest that this be kept in a separate place from the actual hardware device. So there's one more concept that I want to bring up to you, and this is actually the way that I've chosen to go, is you can use an exchange, which I do have some exchange accounts that keep very small amounts of money in there, such that I wouldn't be unhappy if something happened to it and I lost it. It wouldn't be a big deal, but it is much easier to transact on the exchanges. And then instead of relying on myself entirely with just one device and a series of backup phrases, what the idea that I liked is that I engage with another company, and yes, there is some trust that needs to be given here, but not a lot, as you'll see. Bitcoin, as a part of its code, allows for multi-signatures for one wallet. And this is like a little bit like the old safe deposit box at the bank, where you have one key, but the bank has the other key, and it takes both keys to open the box. What you can actually do is create a multi-signature wallet, or a multi-sig. And this is native to the Bitcoin code, so this is something that was thought of originally. And this multi-sig protection means that it will actually create 3 keys, or 5 keys, or 7 keys, whatever you'd like. But in the case of 3 keys, it would take 2 out of those 3 keys to open that wallet. Now, the neat thing about this is that what you can do is you can keep yourself 2 of those 3 keys, ensuring that you can always open the vault whenever you want to. but you could give a backup key to a third party to hold for you, and that's what I did. In this case, this company is called Unchained Capital, not a recommendation. It's just one of those out there that is able to do this for you. But Unchained Capital can hold one of your keys, one of your multi-sig keys. Now, it's obvious they can't open the wallet on their own. They simply can't. They only have one of the keys. But if something terrible were to happen to one of my two other keys, and the dog would eat the Trezor device, and I would somehow manage to lose the backup phrases entirely, now I can contact this third party, Unchained Capital, and recover the entire wallet by using the one key that I have remaining and the other key that they're holding for me. So it's sort of an additional layer of protection whereby you're not putting all the responsibility on yourself for the whole thing. And if you do manage to mess up one part of it, there's still a way to recover a part of it. And that appealed to me a bit. So multi-sig protection, 2 out of 3 keys to open the account. Third party holds one of them and you have the other 2. So you always have access, but if something goes wrong, you can get some help and recreate the entire wallet, recreate more keys, and reload Trezor devices and start all over again, basically. So that's another option, even if you do go the self-custody route. You've not given up any custody to them. They do not have the other 2 keys or access to them, but you do have a little bit more of a backup. So multi-sig can help protect you from yourself. But the basic rule is never, never, never share your private keys. That is the access to your account. And just like your password to get into your bank account, you just wouldn't share that with anybody. And don't be fooled by phishing attempts or anything like that it's necessary. It's not. It's simply not necessary for you to share your private keys with anybody, even if you're using a multi-sig partner. So the other nice thing about the multi-sig partner is that they can help you perform key checks on your devices. And so every 3 months or so, I can perform a backup check of the actual devices just to make sure that they're still functioning properly and will work when I need them to. The nice thing is that also there are new custodial models coming out every day. This is being acknowledged as an area that, because that self-custody is such an important factor, that there are better and better use cases coming out, more hybrids where the exchange hosts your key for you and other variations on this. So I encourage you to explore that. Nevertheless, the idea of self-custody is really one that's hugely important to the Bitcoin universe and is part of keeping this out of the hands of the current financial system, the banks and the governments. And so this was from the start an important factor. So I hope that helped understand how you can custody your Bitcoin yourself. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. My next lecture, number 7, is going to be about the world of altcoins. Everything that you've seen being created from that original Bitcoin code that can be copied and tinkered with. And we'll use my model a little bit with the 4 different quadrants to describe how some of these new variations on coins and blockchains have been developed. But I thank you for watching. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions or would like to contact further.